My name is Sarah Whitman. I'm 27 years old, and my story begins on a cold Thanksgiving evening at my brother's house. We were all gathered around the long oak dining table, laughter bouncing off the walls, but my stomach twisted with unease. I had felt out of place before, but nothing prepared me for the words that cut across the room like a knife. Servants don't belong at this table. That single sentence turned a family holiday into the night I finally made a decision that would change everything. White right pointing backhand index before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The night began like any other holiday gathering, but I remember every detail as if it were carved into my memory. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, mixing with cinnamon, nutmeg, and the faint sweetness of pumpkin pie cooling by the window. The house glowed with warm light, but to me, it felt more like a stage where I had been forced into the wrong role. My brother, Daniel, always played the host with pride, walking around in his tailored sweater, pouring wine, shaking hands, making sure everyone knew this was his home, his success. I slipped my coat onto the back of the chair and tried to smile as relatives greeted me. Aunt Marlene hugged me quickly, already distracted by Daniel's stories about a new business venture. My cousin Kelly whispered a polite hello before darting off to help Daniel's wife, Lauren, in the kitchen. And just like that, I was standing there, feeling invisible in a room full of family. "Sarah, sit wherever you like," Lauren called out, her tone cheerful but sharp enough to sting. She set down a tray of stuffing and gave me a look that felt less like hospitality and more like surveillance. My seat ended up near the far end of the table, close to the window where the cold air seeped in through a draft. It wasn't intentional, at least not openly, but somehow I was always placed just a little away from the center of attention. As we bowed our heads for grace, I caught Daniel's proud smile. He prayed a long, polished prayer that sounded rehearsed, thanking God for blessings, success, and the abundance this family had worked hard for. His words didn't include me. Not really. I lowered my eyes and whispered my own silent prayer for patience. Dinner began, and conversation roared like a river. My brother bragged about his new investment, a massive deal that he claimed would take Atlas Incorporated, our family's company, to another level. I listened as he boasted about meetings, contracts, and profits, all while Lauren chimed in, praising his brilliance as though he were the only one who ever sacrificed for that company. No one asked for my opinion. No one even glanced in my direction. I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate, the silver fork scraping softly. My mind wandered to other Thanksgivings, smaller ones from childhood. Back then, Mom used to make us sit at the same table, no matter what. She believed family was family, and nobody deserved less space or less respect. I could almost hear her voice in my head. "You belong, Sarah. Don't forget that." But Mom wasn't here anymore, and without her, the table felt heavier. Lauren's voice cut through my thoughts. "Daniel, you should tell them about the new deal. 30 million, wasn't it?" Her eyes sparkled with pride, and Daniel leaned back, soaking in the attention. I tried to sip my water quietly, but Lauren's gaze shifted toward me. It was subtle at first, the way her smile curved like a blade. "Isn't it something, Sarah? Real success doesn't happen by sitting around, does it?" The words were dipped in sugar, but the aftertaste was bitter. The table laughed politely, though a few glanced my way. I gave a small nod, pretending not to feel the jab. My cheeks burned, but I forced my lips into a smile. As the plates were passed, Lauren leaned closer, lowering her voice but loud enough for others to catch. "Some of us earn our seat here, don't we, Daniel? It's not just handed to us." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head as if she were just teasing. No one corrected her. No one defended me. The knife cut deeper when she finally said it, clear and sharp, with no room left for misunderstanding. "Servants don't belong at this table." Silence dropped over the room like a heavy blanket. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My chest tightened, the air suddenly thick and hard to swallow. Around me, people shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Marlene cleared her throat. cousin, Kelly, looked down at her plate. No one said a word. Not even Daniel. I laughed softly, but it wasn't the laugh of amusement. It was the kind that comes when pain finds no other escape. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for me to shrink, to brush it off, to play the part they'd already written for me. But inside, something shifted. I thought about the years I spent building Atlas, the countless nights I worked while Daniel slept, the contracts I closed quietly, the weight I carried while he paraded as the face of the company. I thought about the sacrifices, the missed holidays, the loneliness, also the family business could survive. And here I was, treated like an outsider at the very table I had helped put food on. The sound of laughter picked up again, though nervous and broken. Daniel changed the subject quickly, diving back into his stories, but I barely heard him. My eyes traced the length of the table, faces I had known all my life, yet none of them truly saw me. I took a slow breath and sipped my water. My hands trembled under the table, but not from fear, from resolve. Something had cracked open inside me, something that couldn't be pushed back down. The rest of the meal blurred. I remember the clinking of glasses, the scraping of plates, the smell of gravy, but everything felt distant, like I was watching from another room. Every smile from Lauren, every boast from Daniel, every nod from the relatives became background noise to the decision forming quietly in my heart. By the time dessert was served, I already knew this night wasn't going to end the way they expected. Because Lauren's sentence, cruel and careless, had given me clarity. I wasn't a servant at this table. I was the reason it even existed. The fork rested heavy in my hand as I looked around the table, pretending to be lost in thought. In reality, I was replaying Lauren's words over and over. To her, my jeans and modest cardigan were a symbol of failure. To the others, the old truck parked in the driveway screamed unsuccessful. And in their world, simplicity wasn't a choice, it was proof of inadequacy. But what they never saw was the deliberate nature of my life. I could have walked into that house wearing diamonds. I could have parked a luxury car in the driveway. I chose not to. And yet, in their eyes, that choice erased every accomplishment I'd worked for. As the plates shifted and conversation swelled again, I overheard my cousin whisper to her husband, "Sarah never, got her life together, did she?" The words weren't meant for me, but they landed squarely in my chest. I smiled faintly, hiding the sting, as though I hadn't heard. Daniel raised his glass for a toast. "To family, and to a future built on success," he announced. He glanced at me for just a moment, then looked away before continuing. "We all know hard work pays off." His grin widened as relatives clinked glasses. No one noticed I hadn't lifted mine. I excused myself and slipped into the kitchen for a breath. The sink was piled high with dishes, pots steaming, the air thick with gravy and butter. Lauren followed a moment later, balancing a bowl of cranberry sauce. "Everything okay?" she asked sweetly, though the edge in her tone was clear. "Fine," I replied, rinsing my hands under the tap. Her eyes flicked to my sweater, then to the scuffed watch on my wrist. "You've always been so grounded," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Not everyone needs luxury, I suppose." Grounded. The word burned. She didn't mean humble. She meant stuck. She meant small. I gave her a small smile, not trusting myself to answer. When I returned to the dining room, laughter filled the air again. Daniel had launched into another story about a recent investor meeting. He spoke like a king recounting battles won, each detail exaggerated, every number inflated. His audience leaned in, captivated. "That's the difference," Lauren chimed in, rejoining him. "Daniel knows how to make things happen. Some people, well, they just watch." Her gaze brushed against me, light as a feather but sharp as glass. I stabbed my turkey with a little too much force, the knife screeching against the plate. A few heads turned, then quickly turned back. I forced myself to chew slowly, tasting nothing. As the conversation carried on, my mind drifted backward. Years earlier, when Atlas was nothing more than an idea scratched out on a diner napkin. It was me who worked double shifts to cover the startup costs. Me who signed the first contracts, staying up until dawn proofreading every line. Me who handled suppliers who threatened to walk. Daniel. He had the charm. Yes, but charm doesn't balance budgets or keep the lights on. Yet here we were, years later, and I was invisible. Why? Because I never dressed the part. Because I never cared to perform for applause. The injustice clawed at me, but I reminded myself to breathe. I studied Lauren as she poured more wine into Daniel's glass, her jewelry catching the light like tiny suns. Around her neck, a diamond pendant sparkled, probably bought with Atlas's money, the money I helped generate. Suddenly, Aunt Marlene's voice broke my thoughts. "Sarah, are you still driving that old truck?" I swallowed, nodding. "Yes, it runs just fine." "Oh, honey," she sighed, shaking her head. "You deserve better." Better? As if a truck defined my worth. I forced a laugh. "It gets me where I need to go." Across the table, Daniel smirked. "Some people aim higher than that, Sarah. You've got to think bigger if you want more out of life." His words landed heavy, disguised as brotherly advice but laced with superiority. My jaw tightened. I wanted to scream that I thought bigger every single day, that my restraint wasn't ignorance but intention. But no one at that table wanted to hear the truth. The candles flickered, shadows dancing across the walls. The tiki platter was nearly bare. I studied each face, noticing how easily they accepted the version of me that Daniel and Lauren had painted. The struggling sibling. The quiet one. The background character in their story of success. Inside, I felt something different. A quiet storm brewing, a voice whispering that silence wasn't strength anymore. Just then, Cousin Kelly leaned over. "Sarah, I was telling Lauren the other day, you're so simple. That's not a bad thing. It's just, you don't seem to want much." I smiled tightly. Maybe I already have what I want. She blinked, confused. "But, you could have more. Don't you want more?" The question lingered in the air, echoing louder than the chatter around us. I thought of my small apartment, the quiet mornings with coffee on the balcony, the peace I found in books, in sunsets, in walks down quiet streets. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every choice had been deliberate. And yet, to them, it was failure. Daniel chuckled, breaking the pause. "That's Sarah for you. Always settling." Settling. Another word that cut deep. I placed my fork down carefully, my hand steady though my chest thudded with heat. "Maybe," I said softly, "I just value different things." But no one responded. They had already moved on, the laughter swelling again like waves drowning my voice. I sat back, the noise blurring into a dull roar. My eyes drifted to the window, where the night pressed in, cold and dark. My reflection stared back at me, plain clothes, tired eyes, quiet demeanor. To them, that reflection screamed failure. But behind the glass, I saw something else. A resilience they couldn't measure. A strength they'd overlooked for too long. I clenched my hands in my lap, nails pressing into skin. They thought simplicity meant weakness, but they were about to learn that sometimes the simplest person at the table carried the heaviest power. And I, Sarah Whitman, was done being invisible. The clinking of silverware and the hum of voices filled the dining room, but for me, everything slowed, like sound muffled underwater. I sat straight in my chair, my palms resting on my lap, my heart beating in a rhythm that matched the flicker of the candles. Lauren's eyes found mine across the table, her lips curling in a smile too polished to be genuine. She thrived in this room, in the center of attention, with her diamonds catching the light and her confidence pouring into every sentence. I knew what was coming before she even spoke. There was a shift in her tone, the way she leaned forward, fingers wrapped delicately around the stem of her wine glass. The conversation had drifted to money again, Daniel's deal, the luxury house they'd just purchased, the vacations they had already planned. And then, as if she had been waiting for the right moment, Lauren looked directly at me. Not everyone belongs at the same table, she said smoothly, her voice carrying just enough to make sure the words weren't missed. Some of us are in our seats. My fork stilled, a piece of green bean trembling at its tip. A faint chuckle rippled from the far side of the table, but most people froze, unsure how to react. Daniel smirked faintly, eyes darting to his plate as if agreeing silently but unwilling to own it out loud. I forced my lips into a tight smile. And what does that mean, exactly? Lauren didn't hesitate. She tilted her head, her earrings swaying like tiny chandeliers. It means, Sarah, not everyone contributes the same. Some of us work harder, aim higher. Others. Her gaze trailed deliberately down my sweater and back up to my face. Settle. The word cut like a knife. Settle. She had no idea how hard I had worked, how much I had sacrificed. To her, the measure of success was leather seats and foreign vacations. To me, it had always been about survival, growth, and building something lasting. But no explanation would matter. Not to her. I tried to breathe, to keep calm, but before I could speak, she pressed harder. Her voice grew louder, carrying across the table with theatrical sharpness. Servants don't belong at this table. Silence dropped. The scrape of a fork against a plate stopped mid-motion. Cousin Kelly lowered her eyes. Aunt Marlene cleared her throat as if about to say something but thought better of it. No one came to my defense. Not even Daniel. My chest rose and fell slowly, the weight of her words pressing against my ribs. I could feel eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. Would I laugh it off? Would I stay quiet, as I always had? I didn't. Instead, a laugh escaped my throat, but it wasn't the laugh of humor. It was low, brittle, almost foreign. I didn't recognize my own voice. The kind of laugh that comes from being hurt too many times, from being pushed too far. Funny, I said, my tone calm but sharp. I didn't realize humility made someone less deserving of respect. The room shifted, chairs creaking, cousins exchanging glances. Lauren blinked, momentarily thrown off, but recovered quickly with a smirk. Humility is one thing, she replied smoothly, but being content with mediocrity is another. I'm just being honest. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to diffuse the tension. Let's not make this a debate, all right? Tonight's about family. But even he didn't look at me when he said it. His silence was its own betrayal. I leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to stay composed. My knuckles pressed against the edge of the table, grounding me, stopping me from shaking. Inside, I wanted to scream, to throw every truth I had held back for years into their smug faces. But I stayed still. The silence stretched too long, uncomfortable and heavy. So Aunt Marlene tried to shift the mood. Shall we pass the pie? She asked weakly, reaching for the dessert plates. But the air didn't clear. It only thickened. My cousin's husband, perhaps trying to lighten things, chuckled nervously and said, Well, Lauren does have a point. Success speaks for itself. He lifted his glass toward Daniel. And clearly, some of us have figured it out. More laughter followed, thin and brittle, like glass about to shatter. I looked at Daniel, my own brother, waiting for him to say something. To defend me. To acknowledge that I wasn't the servant in this story, but the architect of the very success he now claimed as his own. But he only smiled, letting the moment pass. The realization settled over me like ice. I was alone at this table. I placed my fork down gently, the sound of metal against porcelain ringing louder than it should have. I lifted my water glass and took a slow sip, buying myself time, controlling the storm brewing in my chest. Lauren leaned back, satisfied. She thought she had won, that her words had placed me firmly in the box she built for me, the lesser sibling, the invisible one. But in that moment, something inside me hardened. I looked straight at her, my voice steady and clear. Respect isn't earned by mocking others, Lauren. You should remember that. The room stilled again, eyes darting between us like spectators at a match. Lauren's smirk faltered, just slightly. I was only joking, she said, though her tone betrayed her. Of course you were, I replied, my voice low but unwavering. Inside, my thoughts raced. For years, I had kept my head down, living simply, letting them believe what they wanted. But this cruel cut in front of everyone, was different. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth. It was about dignity. And though I hadn't acted yet, I knew something had shifted. The laughter resumed slowly, clumsy and forced, as relatives tried to move on. The conversation drifted to holiday shopping, to the football game playing faintly on the living room TV, to anything but the tension that still lingered like smoke after a fire. I stayed quiet, but not because I was weak. My silence now carried weight, like the calm before a storm. As I studied Lauren's proud face and Daniel's careless smile, a thought burned in my chest, steady and undeniable. They had mistaken humility for weakness, and that mistake was about to cost them everything. The evening dragged on with forced laughter and clinking glasses, but I was no longer part of it. My body remained the table, but my spirit had already left. I nodded when spoken to, smiled when necessary, but inside I felt like I was sitting at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss that only I could see. When the pie was finally cut and the plates cleared, I slipped away. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they did, and chose not to care. Either way, the silence of the hallway felt like a blessing compared to the suffocating air of the dining room. I walked toward the coat rack, pulling my sweater tighter around me. My fingers brushed over my phone in my pocket, the cool screen pressing against my skin like a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. I pulled it out, just to hold it, maybe to scroll aimlessly until the noise in my chest settled. But before I could even unlock it, the screen lit up. Unknown number. I frowned. For a second, I thought about ignoring it. After all, who calls from an unknown number on Thanksgiving night? But something urged me to answer. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was desperation for any distraction from the humiliation I had just endured. I pressed accept and lifted it to my ear. Hello. There was static first, faint, like wind brushing against the receiver. Then a voice, low and trembling. Sarah. I froze. The voice was familiar, but muffled, like someone speaking through fear. My grip tightened. Yes. Who is this? A pause. Then, it's better if you don't know my name right now. But you need to hear this. My chest tightened. I glanced back toward the dining room, where laughter rose again as if nothing had happened. My heart pounded in my ears. What are you talking about? I whispered. The voice exhaled sharply, shaky. They've been lying to you. Daniel. Lauren. All of them. And if you don't act soon, everything that's yours will be gone. The world around me tilted. My knees weakened, and I leaned against the wall, pressing my palm flat against the wallpaper to keep from sliding down. Gone. I repeated. What do you mean gone? Your share. Your name. Your work. The years you put into building what they now claim as theirs. They're closing in, Sarah. Paperwork's being signed. If you don't stop it. The line crackled, cutting the sentence short. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Why are you telling me this? Who are you? Another pause. I could hear the person's breathing, uneven and quick, as though they were speaking from a place of danger. Because I can't watch them do this to you. Not after everything you sacrificed. You deserve to know. The sound of a door creaking open echoed faintly through the phone. Whoever this was, they weren't in a safe place. Listen. The voice rushed, urgent now. Check the contracts. Look for the amendments Daniel pushed last month. He changed things, Sarah. He. And then the line went dead. Hello. I whispered, staring at the screen, my hand trembling. Hello. But the call had ended. For a moment, I stood frozen in the hallway, the glow of the phone screen burning into my eyes. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened glass, a woman who had been dismissed, belittled, laughed at, but maybe not powerless. Not anymore. Behind me, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor echoed. Footsteps approached. I quickly tucked the phone into my pocket and straightened, trying to compose myself. It was Lauren, her perfume announcing her before her heels clicked into view. She looked at me with feigned surprise. "Oh, there you are. I wondered if you slipped out. Everything all right?" Her voice dripped with false sweetness, but her eyes glimmered with satisfaction, as if she was savoring my discomfort. I forced a smile. "Just needed some A." Lauren tilted her head, studying me. For a second, I thought she could see straight through me, could hear the frantic pounding of my heart, could know about the call that was still echoing in my ears. But then she simply shrugged, adjusting her bracelet. "Well, don't be gone too long. They are about to make a toast." She smirked, then turned on her heel and disappeared back into the dining room. I let out a shaky breath once she was gone. The phone in my pocket felt heavy, almost dangerous, as though the truth it carried could set fire to everything around me. I wanted to run, to grab my coat, step outside, and never look back. But instead, I walked slowly toward the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My reflection in the mirror stared back, pale and strained. I pulled out the phone again, scrolling through recent calls. The number was there, unknown. No way to trace it. I gripped the sink, my knuckles white. Questions stormed through my mind. Who was that voice? How did they know so much? And, was it true? A memory flashed, long nights in Daniel's cramped apartment years ago, spreadsheets spread across the table, our plans for business scribbled in cheap notebooks. I remembered the passion, the drive, the promises we made. Back then, we were partners, equals. But now it seemed like everything had been rewritten while I wasn't looking. And the worst part, if what the caller said was true, then Daniel wasn't just letting others mock me. He was stealing from me. The bathroom walls felt too close, the air too thick. I turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on my face, grounding myself. Drops clung to my skin as I whispered, "No, not this time." My phone buzzed suddenly, jolting me. A text message appeared. "Unknown number. Be careful who you trust." I stayed at it, my pulse racing. My breath caught in my throat. Someone out there was watching. Someone new. And my world, already cracking, had just split open. The glow of the text still burned into my eyes. Be careful who you trust. My pulse thundered in my ears, louder than the muffled laughter seeping through the bathroom door. I stared at the words again, my thumb hovering above the screen as though touching it might somehow reveal more. But it didn't. Just those 5 words, heavy as iron, pinning me in place. I slipped the phone into my pocket, wiped my damp palms against my sweater, and inhaled deeply. Something inside me shifted in that moment. Not a flicker, not a spark, but a clean break. Whatever patience, whatever loyalty I had clung to for years, shattered like glass underfoot. When I stepped out of the bathroom, I wasn't the same Sarah who had entered. My heart still raced, but my spine felt straight, my breath steady, my footsteps sure. I walked back into the dining room like someone who belonged there, not as a guest, not as a servant, but as someone who owned the air they were breathing. The room fell briefly quiet as I reappeared, though perhaps I only imagined it. Lauren's eyes flicked toward me with that smug tilt of her chin, her lips already curving into the smirk I'd come to despise. Daniel didn't even look my way, too busy raising his glass as Uncle Rob cracked another joke. I slid into my chair without a word, placing my phone on the table beside my untouched wine glass. My fingers rested lightly on it, like a pianist poised before the first note. "Sarah," Lauren said sweetly, her voice sharp enough to cut. "We were just saying how nice it is that you could join us, even though, well, you've been busy with your little projects." Her laugh tinkled like broken glass. A few family members chuckled politely, more out of obligation than humor. I smiled. Not a wide, forgiving smile, but something measured, deliberate. "You're right, Lauren. I have been busy. In fact, I'm still busy. Right now. Her brow furrowed, but before she could respond, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. My lawyer's line. The room hushed. Every head turned toward me as I lifted the phone to my ear. Evelyn, I said when she answered, my voice calm, steady, almost too casual. Terminate the Atlas contract. Effective immediately. There was a pause on the other end, then a clipped, professional reply. Understood. I'll send confirmation within the hour. I ended the call, placed the phone back on the table, and looked up. For a moment, the room was frozen. Then Daniel's glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. What did you just do? He stammered, his face draining of color. Lauren blinked, her smirk faltering, her carefully painted confidence cracking at the edges. Terminate. Wait, what contract? I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap as if we were discussing the weather. The $30 million deal. The one Atlas was about to finalize. The one you've been bragging about for months. Daniel's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't quite find the air to speak. That's not possible. That contract, Atlas, was never yours to control. I cut in, my voice sharp, slicing through the silence. You thought I was the weak link, Daniel. The afterthought. The sibling who didn't matter. But what you never realized is that Atlas was mine from the beginning. I own the majority. Every signature, every decision. You needed me. And tonight, I decided I'm done letting you steal from me. Gasps rippled around the table. Aunt Claire set her fork down with a clatter. Uncle Rob muttered something under his breath. But no one dared speak louder. Daniel stumbled back, bracing himself against the table. Sarah, you don't understand. This deal, it was everything. No, Daniel. My voice was cold, steady, final. It was everything to you. To me, it was leverage. And now, it's gone. Lauren pushed her chair back, her heels scraping against the floor. You can't just. I just did, I interrupted, my eyes locking on hers. You mocked me tonight, called me a savant at my own family's table. You thought my simplicity meant failure, that my humility meant weakness. But you forgot the most important rule, Lauren, never underestimate the quiet ones. We're the ones you don't see coming until it's too late. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Even the crackling fireplace seemed to falter, its warmth no longer enough to soften the air. Daniel's shoulders slumped, his face ashen. His voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. You ruined me. I stood, pushing my chair back with deliberate calm. No, Daniel. You ruined yourself the day you decided to betray me. All I did was show you who really held the power. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair, sliding it on slowly, deliberately, as every eye followed me. My phone buzzed once more in my hand, Evelyn's confirmation email, but I didn't need to look at it. I already knew the deal was gone. I paused at the doorway, turning back just once. Lauren sat rigid, her lipstick-stained glass trembling in her hand. Daniel looked hollow, broken, a man who had just realized the empire he thought he controlled was nothing but smoke in his grasp. I let the silence hang for one more beat, then said clearly, next time you sit at a table and decide who belongs, you'd better pray it's not me you're underestimating. And with that, I walked out. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside, crisp and clean against my boning skin. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the shadow of someone else's success. I felt free. Behind me, the house buzzed with confusion, shock, the unraveling of lies too long left unchallenged. But I didn't need to see it. Their world was collapsing, and I was already gone. I tightened my coat, lifted my chin, and walked into the darkness, not defeated, not diminished, but finally in control. Because power isn't about who talks the loudest at the table. It's about who decides whether the table even exists.